Success Insight shares the stories of the people with passion and drive who make things happen in the world. Here's your host, Howard Fox.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mind, Body, and Soul series on the Success Insight podcast. The Mind, Body, and Soul series celebrates the journeys and stories of health and wellness professionals, entrepreneurs who are committed to helping their clients and patients, customers realize their physical, emotional, and spiritual courage and well-being. And our guest today is Jenna Noelle. She's a photographer, a creative business mentor, world traveler, and entrepreneur. And I was attracted and very interested to having Jenna on today's podcast and on this series because she is a wedding photographer, or that has been, perhaps a little transition. It was a very important part of her life. And as a former wedding photographer myself, that just touched a chord with me. And I got to thinking about mindset, and I thought this is a perfect place for Jenna. And I'm so glad she's on the show with us today. So Jenna, it's a pleasure to have you on the Mind, Body, and Soul series of the Success Insight podcast. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Fantastic. And for our listeners, again, I met Jenna through Podmatch, which is a kind of a consortium of podcast hosts and guests. And again, if we're going to share some backlinks to her work, which is unbelievable, by the way. But Jenna, if you could share a little bit about your background with our audience, and because I'm very interested in this creative direction that your life has really taken almost since you were just a little kid.
Yeah, well, I've always been artistic. When I was little, it started more with like music and drawing and things like that. And then as I got into high school, everyone takes that photography elective, and my dad gave me an old camera of his. And I just kind of discovered that I was good at it. It was a natural progression of creativity I already had, but continued to just kind of play with it through college. I wanted to be a veterinarian, and didn't really think of it as like a career move. And then something just kind of shifted when I graduated from college, and I kind of had an existential crisis and was like, well, what am I good at? What do I enjoy doing? And I had someone encourage me to try to be a professional photographer, which the thought had never crossed my mind. And I did, and took to it really well, and have been doing it ever since.
Very nice. Now, I'm curious, having our parents hand us a camera, and I'm going to take a guess here. Was that camera digital or film?
Oh, digital didn't even exist yet.
Didn't
it
even,
was film.
Oh, okay, still film, because that's how I started.
Yeah.
When you were given the camera, did you go out and explore with it? And how did you begin to cultivate to be more than just a weekend photographer? I mean, and really begin to care about this image that you were creating with the camera?
So when I first started shooting, it was very much just like based on whatever assignment the teacher gave us, which is kind of just like going out into the world with a blank slate and hoping something will happen. And that's not the kind of photography I do anymore. It was really once I started to get into weddings because I needed a job that I realized, oh, I really enjoy shooting people. I really enjoy shooting emotional content. And above anything else, I really love storytelling. So for me, I haven't really ever gone back to like shooting architecture or shooting kind of like still art, just forms and shapes and stuff, because for me, I really enjoy storytelling.
When you were shooting, and I love the idea of storytelling, and I remember in my days, and I don't necessarily want to keep going back to my days, but I remember in the day it was filmed, and all the photos were very much, here's a list of the photos you're going to take. And there was that checklist.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it was week after week after week. But your photos there's an extreme creativity to it. I mean, just unbelievable. And again, for our listeners, you're going to get a chance to see it. How do you begin to craft the story while you're also creating work in the moment with guests in a highly emotional situation?
That's a good question. Yeah, it's like creating while your creative process is being questioned by everyone around you. It can be very stressful. You have to really be able to set that aside and dial in. I mean, that there is an element of wedding that is still a photo list. Like I still have to take the formal photos, and that's something I curate that list with them ahead of time. But that's very much like a very small portion of the day. The type of clients I work with are giving me a lot of creative freedom. It's a requirement of what type of client I will work to give me a lot of creative freedom to do what I do best, which isn't copy a Pinterest board. It's to dial into someone what's actually energetically happening, and to be able to get that type of photo that feels really raw. And you really have to have a good foundation of trust with the people you're in the room with. So a lot of that starts from first contact and being very like open and wanting to know their stories and share your own stories with them, to your energy that you bring to that day. And my energy that I bring to a wedding shoot is just like so neutral and grounded. And I'm just someone's best friend for the day, and I'm not making it about me. And that gives them a lot of space to be themselves. So I'm not inserting myself into the story. And that's what allows me to be able to tell other people's stories so well.
When you're with a client and the family and the guests, and you also mentioned not everybody is your ideal customer in the case of the weddings. How are they finding you? And then two, how are they taking this discovery that I'm not your traditional go by the checklist kind of photographer? How are they reacting to that?
So there's a different photographer for everyone, right? And as creative professionals, you're wise not to cast a wide net. It's a wiser decision to know yourself and know what you like to do and target all your work, show what you want to sell and target your work towards that person. So I used to advertise on a lot of like wedding service platforms, and that was how I found a lot of my clients. But now it's mostly referral, word of the mouth, and sometimes social media. And I just don't show those post photos. I take them. They're kind of obligatory. I take them. You're not going to find them anywhere on my website because I'm not trying to market towards the traditional bride. So you might have noticed on my website, all the photos are very like, there's motion to it. They're very like tactile. Like you could feel like the wind in their hair, and that very in the middle of a very vulnerable moment. That's what I'm going to show. And then the client that values that is going to see that and contact me.
Okay. When you're shooting, especially in sites that are, for the sake of better words, not traditional, not in the church, the synagogue, or the local park. I mean, here in Nevada, I've got Lake Mead, Red Rock Canyon, Death Valley. I've got lots of places to go with my
Mhm.
clients to go shooting. You're in Denver. You've got many, many beautiful places as well. How does the location play into the type of product or creative work that you are producing for your client?
Some locations, it depends on your style. If you're like a very light and airy photographer, you might do a lot of like more beachy weddings and things like that. And also just depends on where you physically are located. I am located in the mountains, so I end up doing a lot of like big, like mountain vista type weddings. With locations, I kind of know my own style and what locations are going to be conducive to it. And sometimes I get requests for venues where I'm like, you know what, I don't think that's the best fit for my style. And I don't take those clients, and I can refer them to someone who it would be a better fit for. So it's just about really being very specific in what you'd like to create and making sure you curate the circumstances around that to make that possible.
Okay. There were some shots on your website. And by the way, I'm a very opportunistic podcast host. So if you're willing to share a couple of those shots, I'd love to have
Mhm.
those for our show notes.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
There are some shots. One was taken in Iceland with the huge waterfall, and there was another taken. It looked like it was the middle of an outdoor venue. It was pouring rain. I could see the tables off to the sides. I mean, that one in particular was like, that is a great shot. How did this really a location specific shooting in these opportunities like that individual picture. I have no idea where it was taken. The Iceland one, I was reading your story about that. How did this international flair to these engagements? How did they come about?
So that one that was in that kind of like horseshoe Canadian rainstorm, that was actually here in Colorado at a
Okay.
venue up near Red Rocks Amphitheater. But the Iceland one, I just have always wanted to travel my whole life. And so one of the reasons I went into wedding photography or photography in general was because I knew there would be a lot of travel opportunities with it if I made an effort for it to go in that direction. So I just have really marketed myself towards someone who also, like me, likes to travel and is maybe interested in like international weddings. I'm doing one in Italy this year. And like I said, I just really like to showcase that on my site. So it's very clear to people that that's something I have experience in doing and I'm thrilled to do. That particular photo you're talking about in Iceland, that was a friend of a friend, just like I said, word of mouth. And we flew to Iceland and we were there for 4 days. And I'm like still best friends with these people and I'd never met them before that. So it's just a very beautiful experience to do things like that.
That's fantastic. I remember in the days of film, the week between the event and getting the proofs back that I could look at for me was perhaps one of the most excruciating weeks of my life. And unfortunately, it repeated itself nearly every week because
Mhm.
I was, I don't know, I used to call myself a fast food photographer. It's like going to McDonald's and the owners would send me out to these engagements. And it was week after week of the same shots over and over again. But that
Uh,
week to get the proofs back was excruciating. And it just, after about year 13, it was really to the point I just hated doing this anymore because it
yeah.
took a mental health toll. It also took a social toll of
Yes.
not having weekends. And how does this creativity and play into your own well-being as an artist and a creator and really being an integral part of people's very emotional moments?
That's an excellent question and one that I've had to really dial in on in the last 2 years since COVID. I realized I had already come to realize how taxing it was to take on a high volume of clients, emotionally taxing it was. And I had already made the decision to scale back, to raise my prices and scale back. So I had gone from shooting 40 weddings a year to 35, and I came into 2020 with, I think, 26 weddings. And that felt like a significant scale back. But then when I when that COVID hit, I realized I was emotionally responsible for 20 or I felt emotionally responsible for 26 couples and what I myself personally was going through. And I realized I cannot give this many people my highest level of attention. And so because it was so draining on me to hold space during such a traumatic time for that many people, it really forced me to look into how I can take care of myself more, what I needed to change in my brand approach, how I could offer better service to people, how I could scale back so that I had more time to focus on individuals and more time to focus on myself. Wedding photography is really hard on your body. It's really hard on your creativity. And during those 2 years, it was very emotionally difficult. So it forced me to rethink a lot of things that I'm now doing very differently. And it's a difficult needle to thread between your creative side and your entrepreneur side can be antagonistic. So you want to say yes, 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 yes to every opportunity because you're running a business. But as a creator, you really do need to be more selective. And that's balance isn't always 50-50. And you really have to check in and keep those things in line, which is an ongoing process as a creative entrepreneur.
Sure. COVID has been an impact on so many individuals, their professions, family, social life. What I love about Nevada here is when I came out here, literally was right at the start of COVID and being on my own. I do a lot of my coaching, my podcasting in the comfort of my home,
Mhm.
but I can get out to the desert on the weekends. But how did your business and how did you adapt because of COVID, because as a wedding photographer, a creative professional, you have to be there. And so what shifts did you start to make to perhaps reinvent, redefine who you are as an entrepreneur or a creative professional?
So I had realized that I was coming up against a lot of burnout. And that burnout was because I wasn't charging enough. I was taking on too many projects. I was taking on projects in venues like we discussed, I was taking on projects in venues that made it very difficult for me to create the kind of work that I like to create, saying yes to clients that weren't really in line with my values as far as what they wanted for their day. And so we all kind of got a forced timeout with that. And it made me rethink my contract. So now I have much more specific terms in my contract for what were to happen in an event. Like if COVID were to happen again, it made me rethink my branding. I really stood back and looked at like, okay, who is this branding appealing to? And is that who I want it to appeal to? And if not, what can I do to shift it? I thought about, I reimagined who my ideal client was in a way that made it easier for me to select my portfolio out instead of just saying, is this a pretty picture? Is looking at it and asking, is this the kind of work I want to continue to create? And I just completely changed all my offerings to more cater to someone who is looking for an a beautiful, curated, very personal experience where every step along the way they're receiving something very special from me. And that also involved raising my prices and changing my marketing strategy. So there really isn't something that I didn't change in the
Sure.
last 2 years.
Did you have your own mentor guide to help you rethink, reinvent who Jenna Noelle was as a creative entrepreneur?
I've also always pursued continuing to educate myself throughout my career. But yes, during this time, I had taken on a mentorship with a man that I've been following his work for about 15 years. And I don't feel like he helped me recreate something. I think he helped me realize what I already was
Mhm.
and that I had been trying too hard to please everyone and to be what's marketable instead of being who I really am. And he helped me kind of muster up the courage to be more vulnerable in my own work and helped me see some common threads throughout it that I was just too close to it to see.
Okay. When we had our introduction to today's episode, I introduced you as a creative business mentor. How is that component showing up for you today?
Well, when I was taking on that mentorship with that professional, he actually told me, he's like, you've been doing this for so long, you should be the mentor. And it had never occurred to me, but I've been doing this for 15 years. And he's right. I mean, I really know all there is to know, the ins and I've been through all of it with this business. And I just decided through that experience with him that I had a lot to offer that I wasn't offering and that I wasn't putting myself out there with. And I've been through peaks and valleys and plateaus and all types of things with this business. And I realized that I really wanted to help other creatives who were experiencing the same thing. And I had had a lot of requests for like my presets, how I develop my photos or how I tone my photos, enthusiasm for how I design my albums. And I just decided to start offering those things.
Are the creative professionals that you're working with, are they photographers just like you, or are you finding that there's other creative types coming to you just through the nature of your work?
Right now, I'm focusing on photographers. I do think most of the things I'm sharing are applicable to most creative entrepreneurs because I'm not specifically telling someone like how to use a camera. It's just that my specific knowledge is in the world of photography, but I do think there is some general help for any creative professional within what I'm sharing.
Sure. I love when you were sharing about being much more discerning about who your ideal client was, raising your prices. And that also brought back a memory when I was shooting. Is right behind me was Aunt Mary, Uncle Joe, cousin Vinny with their little Instamatic camera, not Instamatic cameras, but they had their
Yeah.
own cameras. They had their, in this day and age, we have our smartphones. And have you found that for me, that was like, well, I don't want to have to deal with this every week. How do you help coach an individual who comes to you and says, Jenna, I saw your work. I love it. I want to be just like you. Or how can I do work like this? And how can I succeed as a photographer? Because I knew there was a point to why I made that statement. Our, our, our cell phones take wonderful pictures today.
Yeah.
Okay. And they're immediately saved up to the cloud. So doesn't matter if my phone clogs out, I'll pick up somebody else's phone, but everything is so instant. How do you coach, mentor, guide someone who wants to go into this profession? And what types of advice would you have for them?
Well, the first thing I would tell them is you don't want to be just like me. Let me help you figure out what's you. I always tell people if you're trying to be just like someone else, the highest you could hope to achieve would be a second-rate version of that person. That's not a very high bar. You want to be the best version of you. So I would immediately shoot that down. And as far as iPhoneography and everything like that, if someone thinks that their iPhone photo is at all the same thing as your professional photo, I mean, I don't feel like I'm encountering that kind of person. It's just they're very, very different things. And I've set boundaries around that. So I have it in my contract that no one's allowed to shoot over my shoulders when I'm doing formal photos. No one's allowed to shoot over my shoulders when I'm with the couple. I don't require it, but I do put a disclaimer in my contract that if you have people let people have their cameras and phones out during the ceremony, it's going to affect the quality of your photos. So I just set very clear boundaries around that, and then it doesn't come up. And because I've been enforcing that boundary for so long, it doesn't terrify me to turn around and say, hey, Uncle Bob, can you please put your phone away or please not do that right now? Because it's just something I've practiced.
Yeah, I just remember that it was huge. And after a while, I would just like, okay, whatever, because I know mine are going to be much better. All
Yeah.
right. Looking back at your photography, was there an aha moment for you when you looked like this is cool, or wow, I can't believe I'm here doing this?
Yeah, the first time I went to Iceland, I remember when I was just moved to Denver, I'd been a photographer about 2, 3 years. I was working in a coffee shop and a friend of mine showed me this music video that was shot in Iceland. And I don't think I'd ever even seen a photo of Iceland before. It was way before that became a thing, eloping to Iceland. And I remember watching this music video and just being like, oh my God, I am going to go there one day. I'm going to shoot there. I can't, that's going to happen. But then I kind of filed it in the back of my mind and didn't really seek to pursue it for a while. And then a few years later, eloping to Iceland became a thing. And I was like, that's it. That's my in. That's how I'm going to get there. And I was lucky enough to come across a client that wanted to do it. And we got out there and I didn't really research. They hadn't told me exactly where the locations where all this was going to be going down was. So I had it back researched where I would actually be shooting within the country. And when we showed up for the ceremony day, we were walking out on this beach and I realized it was the exact same beach from that music video I had seen years and years ago. And in that moment, I was just like, oh my God, you did it. You did it so literally. You're on that exact same spot. You made it happen. And that was a moment for me when I realized I really can make anything happen and I'm a powerful person. And I just have to really, if I continue to set my intentions and set my mind on things and keep track, I'm going to be able to achieve those goals.
Fantastic. Well, that wonderful shots. And again, I'm hoping we'll share a couple of those, or at least we'll have links to your website because I mean, our listeners, they need to see it. As an entrepreneur, a business owner, I mean, you're responsible for the brand, the Jenna Noelle brand. How do you take care of yourself?
That's something, self care is something you really have to keep track of when you work for yourself. I do a lot of therapy, to be honest. I take a lot of baths. I walk my dog. I try to cook. I try to go to the gym. It has to be an intentional intentional choices you're regularly making, setting boundaries around, I'm not going to answer emails 24 hours a day. I'm going to have a cutoff time for how long I'm going to edit, that sort of thing.
Okay. Where do you see yourself? And I always used to hate this. I had a job. What do you want to be doing in 5 years, 10 years? Like, I don't know. I mean, 4 years ago, if you said I was going to be podcasting and running that, I would have said, okay, yeah, whatever. But do you have a sense of where you would like to be in, let's just say 3 to 5 years or perhaps longer?
3 to 5 years, I would like to be doing a lot more philanthropic work. I'd like to be donating my photography to causes I want to get behind. I'd like to really be building up my education brand and working with more creatives, helping them find success in their own lives. And I would like to very much be limiting my wedding work to only projects that really inspire me. So, probably a lot of travel or people I have a really strong connection with. So, I can make sure I'm really feeling passionate about every single thing that I do.
Okay. Speaking of causes, again, getting back to the website, your Facebook, Instagram, there were some photos in some areas that are verily the social, economic aspects of these areas are hard. They're sad and very emotional. People are just going about trying to make a living. I'm thinking Ukraine right now. People are just
Yes.
some really terrible things, and somehow they're going to have to come out of it. Where are some of the countries or locations, the causes that you would see embracing as you continue to advance as a creative, as an entrepreneur?
So, I assume what you're referring to is the work that I did in Nepal. I did some work documenting the efforts of an organization that combats sex trafficking out of Nepal called Global Orphan Prevention. And that was really rewarding work. And I would like to continue to get behind efforts like that. There's a Denver based organization that helps educate and provide resources for single moms in Africa that I would really like to travel with next year. And I just think I want to tell really impassioned stories, these organizations that are doing incredible work for the world that isn't really getting seen. And the power of photography, if we think of photos that were taken 60, 100 years ago in a faraway land, when you look at a photo that's well shot, you can empathize with what's going on in that situation. And I think that empathy is a powerful social motivator. So if I can be the person to take that photo that's going to help inspire someone to donate or get involved, I want to be that person.
Very good. Very good. Jenna, if our listeners would like to learn more about you and your work, where are the best places for them to go?
My website, Jenna-Noelle-Creative, is going to house all my projects. So you'll be able to choose if you want to go see my weddings and couples work, or if you want to see my photojournalism, or if you want to go over to my education brand, which is called Endless Summer Collective. And I named it that because I would like to bring in other creatives. At some point, my goal is to bring in a bunch of creatives to create workshops and mentorships. And that is where you're going to find my presets, contract templates, album design, mentorship options, all that sort of thing.
Very good. Very good. And you're also on Facebook and Instagram, and those are good.
Yeah. Yeah. Facebook is Jenna Noelle Creative. And I have an Instagram handle at Jenna Noelle Creative, but the biggest account I have is Jenna Noelle Weddings. And that's where I have the largest body of my work.
Okay. Fair enough. Well, we'll provide the backlinks to that as well. And by the way, I want to thank you for the guest that's joining you on today's podcast. Describe the guest for us.
The guest is a very emotionally unstable, fluffy cat named Hobbs.
Hobbs.
Yeah.
I love it.
His energy is chaos. So,
Okay. Well, chaos can be good. I
yeah.
love it. Well, listen, Jenna, I appreciate you taking the time to join us on the Mind, Body, and Soul series on the Success Insight podcast. It's wonderful to hear about your work, how you came into this space of being a photographer and just where you're going with your career. And again, as a former wedding photographer, it was just that was the real hook for me, because it's like I kind of figure some of the things you're going through, and I just remember how it affected me. And I love that you are an open book and willing to kind of share about your journey. And I'm sure our listeners will appreciate that as well. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for having me. It was wonderful.
Very good. We'll stay on the line. We're going to do a real quick close, and you and I can have a final chat. Okay.
Okay.
All right, folks, we have just been chatting with Jenna Noelle. She's a photographer, creative business mentor, world traveler, and entrepreneur. We've learned so much about Jenna's work and really what she is doing to define her delivery of her creative best self, and really the focus on not being the cookie cutter, because I remember my days as a photographer was very cookie cutter, but she definitely has a very discerning brand. And but the work she is producing is just unbelievable. And you definitely have to check that out on her website, Jenna-Noelle-creative.com. And we'll provide all the backlinks to social sites as well. And really just kind of, it was kind of cool to actually chat with another photographer. And I am just a little bit envious some of the places she shot, but you know something, it is what it is. Okay. But just really some phenomenal work. And I do want to recommend that you go out and check it out. Folks, if you enjoyed today's episode of the Mind, Body, and Soul series, you can find us on successinsidepodcast.com. We are also on LinkedIn and Facebook, Success Inside Podcast, as well as all of the major podcasting platforms. So let us know your thoughts on today's episode. If you enjoyed it, share it with your friends, like it, comment. We definitely want to hear from you, as well as any of our other episodes in our podcast library. Okay, folks, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there, have a phenomenal day. And we will see you on a future episode of the Mind, Body, and Soul series on the Success Inside Podcast. Take care now.
Success Insight is a production of Fox Coaching and First Story Strategies. Find us online, successinsightpodcast.com.